What's the stupidest reason you got in trouble in school? Grad school, as in full-grown adult. One of my patients was a chill guy. We had one of those relaxed relationships. He would fist bump me after treatment was completed. The Dean of Academic Affairs did not like that. Got a 45-minute lecture on doctor-patient relationships and how dare I violate that trust with a fist bump. Story 2. In 1993, the Flaming Lips song She Don't Use Jelly came out. I was in 3rd grade and I really liked that song, and started singing it with my friends during a double-handed jump roping session. And boom, written up. 3-day suspension for saying intimately suggestive things. Now, I had no idea it was meant in any sort of suggestive way. Even worse, no one would explain why it was suggestive. It was all just very confusing. Story 3. I tripped on a loose tile and bumped into a teacher, causing her to spill her coffee on herself. I apologized and showed her the tile. She went on for months about how I did it on purpose. Even got the principal and my folks involved. For the rest of the year, she told me I couldn't come back to her class unless I apologized for doing it on purpose. Never went back to her class. Though I initially apologized for the incident, I never once apologized for doing it on purpose, because I didn't. Screw you, Ms. Helm. This is such a weird ego trip for a teacher, isn't it? Like, I understand teaching children to apologize for things they did. If they are insisting something was an accident and you really think it was on purpose, like, it will never end. It literally will never end. As the adult in the situation, I feel like you're the one who's supposed to be not so bullheaded about it. Maybe I've got the wrong take, but I don't know. It just feels like a very frustrating situation for the student who didn't do anything wrong. Story 4. For not looking at the teacher during lesson. I wasn't fidgeting, just sitting at my desk, staring into space. And we had a payment system in 3rd grade where you would get dollars for good behavior, finishing homework, cleaning up after lunch, and lose them for bad behavior. At the end of each quarter, we'd use the dollars to buy stuff at the book fair. Every kid wanted to stock up. Now, each task would get you between $1 and $2. Each day, you could only get like 3 max. She charged me $20. It was literally heartbreaking and took me a full month to recover. Turns out I had focal epilepsy and was having episodes in class. Got treated like a crappy kid for it all throughout high school. Story 5. In middle school, some kids were stomping on caterpillars during recess. I took a Ziploc bag from my lunch and put as many caterpillars in it as I could to rescue them by taking them somewhere else. I fast walked away to get away fairly quickly without making a scene. A teacher stopped me and accused me of running and shoving. I didn't touch anyone at all. And when she saw the bag, she gave me a look of utter disgust. I got lunch detention for it. I ultimately switched out of that school because the staff had it in for me for some mental health issues and quirks that I later discovered was Asperger's syndrome. Story 6. I threw a closed pen to my friend who was like 3 feet away from me, and the teacher freaked out. He made a big deal out of it in front of the whole class for a solid 5 minutes, and then emailed my parents. Luckily, my mom was able to see my side of things, and she said, "Doesn't that teacher have better things to do than email me about my child throwing pens?" We still laugh about it from time to time. Story 7. In middle school, the bell to send us home didn't go off in time. We were all standing by the door waiting to leave when all the other classrooms started leaving to go home. The hallways were filled and teachers were telling people goodbye, so my classroom started to leave too. I was one of the first ones out, but apparently our teacher caught the end half of the class and made them sit down, because he said, "I dismiss you, not the bell." So all of us who left, like the rest of the school, got detention. Story 8. First, I did many things to get in trouble legitimately. I went undiagnosed with ADHD inattentive type for a long time. I would laser focus on schoolwork and get it done quickly and then get bored and disrupt everyone else. The secretaries in my elementary school office knew me on sight when I went back to visit in high school. But there were a couple of times that were questionable. Clapping. In 4th grade, I learned you can clap louder by having the fingers on one hand go into the palm of the other. I was part of a mini concert for our extremely talented string students, and I was kicked out and sent to the office because I clapped along with everyone else. But a teacher felt I was being disruptive, abusing my newfound power. It was decades ago, so I can't really know if I was being a jerk or not. And sneezing. I sneezed several times, like a duck quacking. I got it from my grandfather who did the same, if those things are hereditary. I can try to hold it in, but then it looks like I'm having a seizure. Our middle school science teacher immediately tried to give me ISS when I sneezed for the first time, and it took the whole class vouching for me before she relented. After that, people would just pause for me to finish, and I would apologize. Yeah, teachers were probably just really ready to give OP punishments. Like, I get it, if they did valid things to receive punishments, then they're more likely to give them for smaller things too, because they're just like, oh, it's just OP acting up again. The clapping one, I can kind of see it. I don't think it's deserved necessarily, but I get it at least. The sneezing one is just unfortunate. Can't do anything about that. Story 9. I dropped my phone down an entire flight of stairs once. I took it out of my pocket, it slipped. I tried to catch it with my hand, but I just ended up hitting it forwards and upwards. It landed at the bottom of the stairs flat on the screen. It was completely broken, except for one thing. It could still receive phone calls. So next period, my classmates kept calling me on repeat, and I couldn't do anything about it because my phone could not silence or ignore the call. Naturally, my teacher blamed me, and I was sent to the principal's office, who told me to never do it again, and that they would be keeping my phone for the rest of the day. I seriously don't even think they realized it was freaking shattered when they were holding it. On the bright side, the don't do it again? That's a pretty easy command to follow, isn't it? Story 10. I had to write a book report in 4th grade, but I didn't think a crappy 5-paragraph essay would do the book justice. It was a really good book. So I made a mini trifold poster about the plot and character arcs and little clay figures, and it had all the elements of a book report. It just looked different. Everybody had to read their book reports out loud in front of the class, so when it got to my turn, I went up and presented, and everybody loved it. Except the teacher. She was a complete jerk, and the entire reason I hated English class until my junior year of high school. Anyway, she didn't like that I did it different, so she stopped me in the middle of my presentation and told me to see her after class. When I went to her desk, she told me that I wasted my time and I was going to stay in at lunch and write the book report. She's probably not on Reddit, but if you're out there, Mrs. Livesey, screw you. Edit. I don't remember the name of the book, sorry. I was 8 years old. It was probably standard 4th grade stuff like Stuart Little or something. Also, it was technically still an essay, just cut up and pasted all over the poster. It even had a conclusion. It just didn't look like an essay. Teacher didn't even read it. Also, this was the same teacher that, when I wanted to do an experiment that measured how far humans can hear in air versus water, said it was too complicated for a little 4th grader. Suck my butt, Miss Livesey. I got 2nd place in a competition I was technically too young to enter, but I got special permission with that frickin' experiment. Screw your experiment like telling the difference between Skittles by taste. Disclaimer, I love Skittles. Now, I understand if as a teacher you couldn't give this a better grade because you don't, want to incentivize kids to go above and beyond every requirement because that's a lot of pressure if they want to do really well in the class, right? There are valid reasons to not grade it higher, but grade it as an essay at least. To fully not accept it because they presented it differently, especially when they had to present it anyway, come on. This sort of thing should absolutely be encouraged. The creativity, the engagement in the material, are you kidding me? I feel like 9 teachers out of 10 would have loved this. Hope he just got unlucky. Also, did people write 5-paragraph essays by grade 4? Was I behind the curve? Or do I just not even remember grade 4? That seems like a lot. Story 11. We had a substitute teacher that everyone hated. I wasn't really paying attention to her explanation of something that made no sense. After a few minutes, she demanded I paid attention to her explanation. I said, "Yes, Captain," because I heard it on SpongeBob that morning, and she made me sit outside the class because I was being a spoiled brat, according to her. Eventually, more people began to say yes, Captain, so they could also get away from her because everyone hated that teacher. Eventually, we were all sitting outside the class with 5 people, and we didn't have any work for a few hours because she totally forgot about us. It was a blessing, because there were no consequences aside from getting away from that stupid teacher. If it were super deliberate, I can see how saying yes, Captain could be sarcastic or snooty or whatever, and a teacher wouldn't love it. OP didn't put what grade this was in or how old they were, so that makes it a little harder to judge, in my opinion. If a student was replying yes, Captain in senior year of high school, yeah, they're being a jerk. Or at the very least, cheeky, In grade 3, they mentioned SpongeBob that morning, right? It couldn't have been that old. This definitely seems like an overblown punishment for what it is. Story 12. When I was in 3rd grade, we kept all of our folders in this little denim pocket on the backs of our chairs. About halfway through the year, mine ripped, so it was pretty difficult to keep everything inside. I was a relatively quiet kid, though, and didn't say anything to the teacher. One day, we had a substitute. She was a pretty typical old woman who didn't seem to care much about us at all. We had to take a spelling test that day, so she asked us to put our dividers up. As well as being a quiet kid, I was also a kid with undiagnosed ADHD. I already knew the material she was teaching us, and I instead got myself absorbed into a book. I didn't notice it was time to take the test until my classmates were putting up their dividers. I shut my book and went to grab mine. At that exact moment, my denim pocket completely broke. There were papers everywhere. My panicked little 7-year-old butt scrambled to get them all and put them back in, but putting folders in a broken pocket is an arduous task, and the tests were already passed out before I could finish. So what does the sub do, seeing this tiny 3rd grader scrambling to shove 30 crinkled note sheets into a little red folder? Oh, you know, she screamed at me. I'd never had a teacher go off on me like this sub did. She ridiculed me for holding up the class and making the other students wait. I couldn't help myself. I burst out crying, which only made her yell even louder. I obviously wasn't some perfect angel during elementary school. I was smart, but I also had a lot of behavioral issues at the time, once again, undiagnosed ADHD. However, I couldn't always control my actions, and my teachers were usually very understanding of that, seeing that I was otherwise a pretty chill kid. But this substitute yelled at me as though I had spilled my papers on purpose. My little brain could understand being disciplined for something caused by my actions, but I couldn't comprehend being screamed at for something completely out of my hands. I had actual nightmares from this woman. I don't even know why, because I can deal with those people fine nowadays. She ended up telling the principal about me, but luckily he was a pretty chill dude. I never had that substitute again. Being disciplined for something that you did on purpose, yeah, that would make sense as a kid, or at least more sense than this. Being yelled at, though, seems excessive for most things, like 95% of things a kid can do, especially as a substitute teacher. Like, stay in your damn lane. Story 13. In 11th grade, I'd gotten pink eye in both eyes. I'd never had it before, just thought I was having a reaction to my eyeliner or whatever. I was in 2nd period, cooking 101. My teacher kept looking at me funny the entire class. Eventually, she asked to talk to me in the hallway. She told me that I needed to go to the nurse's office because I was stoned, and she could tell by how fascinated I was with the cooking we were doing. I was so confused. I kept trying to tell her I was having some sort of allergic reaction, but she wasn't having it and yelled at me, told me to grab my things and go now. Pretty much berated me while the whole class could hear and had me so frustrated and embarrassed I was in tears. I walked into the classroom, everyone was staring at me in silence. Grabbed my stuff and went to the nurse. One look at me and she confirmed, yep, it's pink eye. Got to go home and stay home for a few days. I remember my teacher tried to apologize for the incident, and class was super awkward after that. Story 14. In 7th grade English class, a classmate looked pretty sad, so I asked how she was doing. No malicious intent, just wondering what was making her so upset. But she started sobbing. I apologized and moved on. Later that day, I get pulled from a different class by a math teacher that I've never met before, who yelled at me in the hallway, making snide remarks about my parents and their parenting capacity. She made me sit in front of the principal's office to wait for the principal to talk to me for 4 hours. Long after the school day had ended. When the principal finally did show up, he had no idea why I was sitting there. Middle school me was too shy to make a fuss about it, but in hindsight, I should have made a complaint about her. To this day, the girl that I supposedly bullied has no idea why the math teacher flipped out at me. Story 15. I defended myself against the bully that was bothering me for years. My family and I reported it multiple times to the school, changing classes because he was in them, only for him to then be changed into my exact same classes because he was disruptive. What a shock. So I had to keep dealing with this jerk for a majority of my high school career. One day he did something / said something to me. I don't remember what, but I just snapped. In all of my built-up anger, I screamed, "You want to screw with me? Do you?" and attacked him. I was seeing red, fully prepared to beat all of my anger and frustration into him that has been building up the last few years as I lunged at him, and he ran away. I sat back down at my desk like nothing happened, but was sent to the principal's office. The assistant principal was really nice and understanding of all of it, saying that they totally understood and were sorry I had to deal with that. But because of school policy, I was suspended. I didn't get in trouble with my parents, though. They stated they were very proud of me for standing up for myself. Not gonna lie, though, it was a cool feeling afterwards. People in the classroom were talking about how I would beat his butt and finally shut him up. And for a wimpy loner kid like myself not having any friends, it felt good. Nobody messed with me after that, and I felt like a kind of badass in a weird sort of way. It feels good to finally stand up for yourself. I don't condone fighting or violence, and that was the last fight I was ever in, but stand up for yourself. Parents need to teach their kids this. Sometimes the only way to get the message across to someone is a physical one, and my message was heard. It felt good. Story 16. A couple of friends and I sat next to our favorite teacher at lunch. We chatted, joked around, and it was fun. Then we left. After lunch, the janitor complained the cafeteria was trashed and asked who was responsible. The teacher who we sat with and talked to during lunch blamed us. We got detention and had to stay after school to clean. We all went to the teacher and said, "Hey, we sat and joked with you. You know we didn't make a mess. Didn't care, stuck with the punishment. Oh, but it gets worse. I missed the bus home. I lived 12 to 15 miles out of town. I had hours of chores to do when I got home. Taking care of animals, stacking firewood, hard frickin' chores. Called my mom to pick me up. Got home and they had called my dad. He didn't care the reason. I got a beating for getting in trouble. Not like, oh, a spanking. Whipped with a belt that left welts, making it hard to sit. My mom believed me, so the next day she went to the school and talked to the principal and teacher. Neither of them cared. To any teacher that reads this, please know that kids are getting abused even if you don't have solid proof. Please try to help them out. Don't do this stuff that puts them in more physical danger and stress. I mean, this teacher just straight up lied from the sounds of it, right? He was just like, yeah, they did it. For no reason in particular. I don't think OP's little advisory at the end would stop a teacher like that. That's just a weird level of dismissiveness and just, I don't know, not caring, but also actively working to get kids in trouble. That's so strange. And the abuse obviously is awful to hear about, OP. I wouldn't say that's the teacher's fault, though. Shifting the blame for abuse is a dangerous thing. And more often than not, I would put almost, if not all, of the blame on the, I don't know, abuser. Of course, don't get me wrong, there are ways to mitigate the problem, I guess, but this does seem more of like a parenting problem than a school problem. Story 17. The stupidest reason someone tried to get me in trouble was for doing the assignment. There was a special needs kid in my programming class, and he had an assistant. She thought I was goofing off on the internet and asked me to stop. I told her I was working on the project. She didn't believe me, so she went to the teacher, who recognized I was indeed working on the project. So nothing came of it. The stupidest reason someone succeeded in getting me in trouble was when we had this sub. He insisted on reading the day's instructions very slowly. It was a work day, and that was written on the board, but he took a half hour to describe exactly what the different projects we were working on were. The problem was, we all knew what we were supposed to do, so we got started. But then he got upset we weren't listening to him, so he yelled at us and started over with his speech. Eventually, he got so upset that he ate up another half hour ranting about how he's an industry big shot, and all the different reasons why he would fire us if he could. Anyway, I had him as a substitute a couple of other times, and he was much better tempered, so I guess it was just a one-off. Story 18. Last day of 7th grade, I had a bottom locker in my middle school. It was before school started, and I realized that with all my crap taken out of it, my little self could fit in my locker. I then proceeded to jam my lock so no one could lock me in it, and I close it up to the amusement of many faculty and students. The story takes a turn when a friend of mine thought it would be funny to quickly unjam my locker and close it with me on the inside. Oh, easy fix, right? Wrong. I didn't know my locker combination, because by that point it was all approximate numbers and all muscle memory. 2 teachers spent 5+ minutes trying to get me out before someone finally found the sheet with my passcode. I was then surrounded by like 8 teachers mad about it, and my guidance counselor took me away from the upset teachers and took me to her office. She proceeded to tell me how it's all just excitement to finish the year, and she told me that I should just go back home for the day since it was the last day anyway. She gave me a $20 Starbucks gift card too. Best counselor I ever had. OP, it doesn't sound like you got in trouble here. In fact, you got a $20 Starbucks gift card. Maybe you were about to get in trouble if the guidance counselor didn't save you, but hey, sounds like you actually got rewarded for locking yourself in a locker, which fits the thread in the opposite way because that's a stupid reason to get rewarded. Huh. And yes, I know it wasn't you who locked yourself in the locker, OP, but still, you did provide the environment where it could happen. And if I know anything about 7th graders, if they have a chance to lock someone in a locker, I feel like most would take the chance. Story 19. I have 4. In high school, I was painting a mural with the art teacher's blessing for a project on one of the walls near the art room, and just kept messing up a tiger's face. I think I ended up repainting it 5 or 6 times. At one point, I got so frustrated I threw my paintbrush at the mural wall when the vice principal, that wasn't a big fan of me from previous events, including 2 that are coming up, was walking by. He took me down to the office and wrote me up for defacing school property. Also in high school, playing cards on school grounds was banned. Admittedly, a lot of us were playing poker and blackjack. At some point after the ban, a few of us were on a spare and playing Go Fish in the courtyard. Absolutely no stakes. We were just burning time. We all ended up getting suspended for 1 day by my favorite VP for gambling on school premises. On the last day of classes before we graduated high school, a bunch of us decided to have a ball hockey game in the empty parking lot. It was behind the mechanics class shop and it was completely empty. 15 to 20 of us showed up and started playing. About 10 minutes in, all of the office staff, janitors, a few teachers, and the RCMP resource officer showed up and told us if we didn't stop, we would be expelled. And now, my favorite. So my good friend, the VP, also happened to be my grade 10 social studies teacher, smaller rural school, and this was our first interaction on the friendship tour. At one point during his class, I ran out of paper, so I asked around to the people close to me if I could get a couple sheets to finish up taking notes with. Mr. B lost his mind for interrupting his class, even though we were just watching a movie, and he dragged me and the person that gave me the paper down to the office. Up until that point, I was a mid to high 80s average student in almost all of my classes, including socials, so I was fairly annoyed I was getting in trouble for such a stupid reason, and was probably acting like a bit of a jerk because of it. So he decided to call my parents. At the time, my mom was out of town visiting her sick mother, so they had to get a hold of my dad, who happened to be in the military. He was an instructor doing some explosives training fairly deep on the base, so it took some time to find him, and the message he got was along the lines of, "There's been a serious incident at school involving your son, and you need to come immediately." Again, being a pretty good student, my father assumed the worst and thought I might be hurt or something, so he hauled it off base and came to the school as quickly as he could. So you can imagine his happiness when he got to my school, only to find out he was called away because his son didn't have paper. My dad sent us, the guy that lent me the paper was still there too, out of the office to the waiting area and tore a strip off the VP for wasting his and the Army's time for something so frickin' stupid. When they came out a few minutes later, the VP was red as an apple and sent us away to our next classes. I did catch some crap from my dad when I got home, but it was totally worth it. Another bonus was the kid I was sent to the office with ended up becoming one of my best friends, even to this day, and was involved in both the gambling and hockey stories. No gambling on school premises for playing Go Fish. Yeah, that's a zero tolerance rule that definitely just doesn't make sense, man. All playing cards are just too dangerous. Let me tell you, that Queen of Clubs is definitely gonna get little Timmy's sent off to juvie. It's a slippery slope, man. I'm pretty impressed that all 4 of OP's stories for getting in trouble were with really stupid reasons. I expected, 1 or 2 to be like, oh, this wasn't that stupid, you kind of deserved it, OP, because 4 stories is a lot. But no, OP really delivered here. On one hand, sucks, OP. On the other, thanks for the stories. You're doing a good service. Story 20. When I was in 8th grade, we had for one day a sub-teacher in our Portuguese class. She had the job to make us make a little text about what we thought was the best invention ever. I made it about toilets. We delivered the papers 10 minutes after. As she was reading them, she would make comments like, "Too many commas," or "This needs more paragraphs." As soon as she got to mine, she stopped speaking, demanded one kid to go and get the principal. The principal comes, reads the text, also furious, picks me up, drags me into his office. In there, he and the substitute called my mom, made her drive 30 kilometers in a traffic-filled city. When she arrived, she read the text and started laughing, like legit crying and grabbing on her stomach. They got so mad at my mom for laughing instead of taking it seriously that the principal suspended me for 1 week. Call of Duty and no homework for 1 week. All thanks to mom. Did they explain why this was such a big problem? Like, what did OP say? Did they find the very concept of toilets offensive? Because if so, look, I got some children's books to show you, namely Everybody Poops. You're gonna hate those. Story 21. Oh, do I have a list for you. 1. Primary school, grade 6. We had a youth Christian band come play for some Christian holiday period that we were at school for. At the end of the show, I had a tickle in my throat and started coughing while still clapping at the end, as everyone else in the church did too. Was pulled aside for booing the performance. No one even booed the whole event from memory, and I couldn't fight it. 2-week detention and forced to join the choir club. 2. High school, grade 8. Someone stuck a rubber to the outside of my school bag, which was on a bag rack outside of the library. No bags in the library. Another student brought my bag in and showed a teacher. Once being identified as my bag, I was given a week detention. 3. High school, grade 8. Did my homework in class, the same class we were given it. Teacher was annoyed I skipped ahead because I already knew it all. Was stuck cleaning the science rooms for that day's lunch break. 4. High school, grade 9. A new student with the exact same name as me joined my school. Proceeded to acquire all of his uniform detention slips for half the year. I fought all of them, but when a substitute would be in charge of detention that day, I couldn't get out of it. 5. High school, grade 10. Complimented my history teacher on her dress. Substitute reported it to higher-ups. Both me and her were investigated by the school to make sure no fishy business was going on. 6. High school, grade 12. 1-day suspension for refusing to complete my assignment. An assignment I had handed in 3 times, all prior to due date, all on a new USB each time as it was for graphic design, and our email system in school couldn't hold the PSD files. I also never got the 3 USBs back. 7. High school, grade 12 again. Skipping a class I was there for. As in, the teacher marked me away and then saw me in class about 5 minutes later, then printed off the detention slip and gave it to me. I was also sitting only 2 seats away from her. 8. High school, grade 12, once again. Had an allergic reaction to makeup we used in special effects. This wasn't a previously known allergy of mine, so I didn't know. Teacher didn't believe me, so I was required to catch up after school the first day I came back. 6, 7, and 8, all the same teacher who I had for 5 years, and also who I complained about to the school for 5 years in a row. Story 22. So I had this one teacher in 7th and 8th grade, Miss Jenny. She despised me because I was constantly forgetting to do my homework and became more and more aggressive because of it. I was an ADHD kid and was crazy disorganized. One time when I went home sick early, she took it upon herself to go to my locker, take out every book, paper, and item and put it into a lunch cart, and wheeled it into the nurse's office to yell at me for having a messy locker, and then tell my mom in an extraordinarily sarcastic voice about how clean her locker is now. Anyway, one time I was taking a test, and the teacher assumed I was cheating and took us both out into the hall and screamed at us and crumpled up our tests. I went home and told my mom what happened and gave her the logic of, even if you checked the test, it would still show that I failed because my answers were likely wrong and didn't match hers. And why would I cheat? I was already failing the class like 2 months before the end of the school year. So parent-teacher conferences roll around next week and this teacher is all smug, ready to ruin my mom's image of her precious little girl. She asks if my mom is aware I'm a liar. Mom immediately says that I've told her about the cheating thing and she believes me, because it made sense. Cheating would have no gain for me. And she asked to see both of the tests. Turns out the teacher had kept them and showed my mom. My mom pointed out how we had literally no answers in common, and most of our dates, history test, were different too. That just PO'd my teacher even more. She tried to say I was rotten in class by sitting there zoning out, I guess. And my mom asked if she had any actual feedback about me, or if she just wanted to be angry. Then she said she would prefer to have the principal in for all of these conferences if the teacher couldn't give actual constructive criticism. The teacher hated me for the rest of the year, but she left me alone for the most part. This was the only time in my entire school career that my mom sided with me on anything. Screw you, Miss Jenny. Story 23. I went to an elementary school that was mostly Hispanic. There were a lot of bilingual kids in my class, as well as a lot of teachers who were bilingual. The kids had a popular game during lunch, Guess the Word, where they would say an inappropriate word for second graders, and we were supposed to figure out the English translation, after which they would tattle on us. The only kids who ever got in trouble for this were the ones who said it in English, but the kids saying the same word in Spanish never got busted. I got busted for saying the less friendly version of crap. They called my mom, dragged her out of work to come pick me up for the rest of the day. She asked what I did, and with the seriousness of saying I had stabbed someone, they said, "Your daughter said crap in the lunchroom today." My mother said, "Crap, is that what you called me down here for?" I got out of school for the afternoon and got cookies when I told her what happened. I always hope that it's like a wake-up call to people who take these cuss words and stuff really seriously when a parent is just like, that doesn't matter to me, dude. It's like no big deal. Like, sure, they shouldn't be saying it, but it doesn't really matter, does it? And I just imagine them clutching their pearls. I don't know. I've always been a big proponent of like, cuss words they're just words, man. It's literally just the social context that makes them bad words or whatever. And hey, if you don't like to cuss or whatever, totally cool. I respect that. It is absolutely your decision. Not your decision, though, to punish other people's children for it. Or at least blow it super out of proportion, I mean. You can have rules within the school. Fair enough. Story 24. 4th grade. Grandma died on Friday afternoon. Forgot my homework over the weekend because of everything going on. On Monday, teacher asks me where my homework is and doesn't believe me. Tells me I'm a bad student in front of the entire class as I walk to the front and pull a bad behavior card. She calls my mom, who confirms the story, and this jerk doubles down. She tells my mom, "It's more important than ever to maintain consistency in a time like this." And she won't remove my bad behavior card. Mom took it to the principal and nothing happened. Saw a teacher at a grocery store 2 years ago. My very soft-spoken mother calls out her name, flips her off from down the bread aisle. Screw you, Miss Newton. Miss Newton, what are you doing? 4th grade, this is probably their first experience with grief. You gotta cut a little slack for that. I don't know, if I had to guess, I would say something bad happened to Miss Newton recently, and there's some like hardcore projection or whatever going on here, because that is just such a wild way to treat a 4th grader. Or who knows, maybe she's just bitter and mean. Anyway, that is all the stories we have for today. I feel like I rambled a little more in my commentary today, so sorry about that. Apparently my brain just thinks it has a lot to say for people getting in trouble in school. But this is one that I'm sure some of you have stories for. So if you do and you'd like to share them, throw them in the comments. I'll read them as always, trust me, I do. For now though, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.